Well, good evening, everybody. Here we are in the middle of October, and in the UK and actually around the world, it's Menopause Awareness Month. And in fact, I understand that tomorrow in the UK is actually known as Menopause Awareness Day. And it's brilliant we have these awareness days so that people, men often in particular, get a bit of an understanding about the impact of menopause on women. But for me, in my line of work, what I'm really wanting to share with women is what you can do to take care of your own health, how you can minimize the impact of menopausal symptoms by having a different awareness and understanding holistically in your body, whether it's through food or through the gut, as I spoke about a couple of weeks ago. And tonight I want to talk about a specific range of chemicals that are known as endocrine disrupting chemicals, because endocrine system is your hormonal system, and when we're going through the menopause, it's your hormonal system, particularly to do with estrogen and progesterone, that has this impact. So I want to explain about why these chemicals have a role and give you a bit of an understanding, just very briefly, about how hormones work in the body, because then you can start to understand why these chemicals may be having such an impact. So just very, very briefly, as I'm sure you're all aware, as you start to go through perimenopause and through the menopause, your estrogen levels are starting to decline, can decline really, really rapidly, because your ovaries will no longer be producing estrogen. And through your younger years in life, we've got this abundance of estrogen. For some people it's too much, but that's another issue altogether. We do still produce some estrogen after the menopause through our adrenal glands, but it's a much weaker form. And we're obviously lacking this estrogen once it starts to decline. Now, what happens in the body with the endocrine system is that our hormones work in a lock and key. So we have receptors on our cells around the body, and we now know that there are estrogen receptors all over the body, including the brain, which is why we understand that as we lack estrogen, it has such far-reaching implications throughout our body. And the way our hormones work in the endocrine system is that you've got receptors on our cells and you have the hormone, and they work like a lock and key. The receptor on the cells is the lock, and the hormones like the key. So you need a direct match. You get the estrogen locking onto the estrogen receptors and exerting an influence in various cells around the body where it's needed. But as we lack estrogen, it gives the opportunity potentially for other things to lock onto those receptors. And this is where these chemicals throughout industry are having such a role. They're known as endocrine disruptor chemicals. They have a very similar chemical composition structure to natural estrogen. They're able to lock onto our receptors and exert an influence in the cell, potentially much greater than we get from natural estrogen. And in fact, when I mentioned that we've got some estrogen, but it's a weaker form of estrogen that we still are able to produce through our adrenal glands. If you've got endocrine disruptor chemicals locking onto our natural estrogen, exerting an influence that's not great and disrupting and dysregulating our hormonal system, but you've got some natural estrogen, it may not be able to lock onto the cells to give you the influence of natural estrogen. So that's just a very brief overview of how our hormonal system works and why endocrine disrupting chemicals have such a role to play. Now, what are these chemicals? I'm just going to read from a list of these as some of the most well-known ones, and then where you find them in your day-to-day life, and then we'll go on to talk about how you can minimize your exposure to them, because this is what we need to try to do. We can't avoid all of these. We're awash with chemicals in society today, particularly I think through after the Second World War, with the growth of manufacturing industry, and more chemicals were being used, and a lot of these are still in use today. Some of them may no longer be allowed to be used. I know in the US some are being banned. However, they remain what we call persistent in the environment, and our body unfortunately may take some of these up. They may stay in our body. They're very hard to get rid of once they are in the body, hence why they can create such havoc in us. Now, just some of these, and where you find them. So we've got something called bisphenol A, BPA. We've got another one called PCB. There are phthalates, funny word to say, phthalates. We've got pesticides like DDT. We've got flame retardant materials like you find in sofas. We've got toxic chemicals like mercury that we find. And as I said, once they're in the body, they're very, very difficult to break down. They can get absorbed into the cells. They're hard to remove. And we're just awash with them. You'll find them in textiles. You'll find them in household goods like furniture. We find them in our water supply because some of these chemicals from the industry are leaching into water supply. And it's why you may hear some of our water companies, they may get fined or maybe not fined enough for not checking the quality of the water that's obviously getting into our own water supply that we're then able to drink. We find them in the air. We find them in the agricultural sector, for example, in things like pesticides, herbicides, and fungicides. So as I said, they can exert a very strong influence on our receptors, on these estrogen receptors. And some of the ways that we're beginning to uncover how they may be having an impact, they are thought to potentially lead to cancers like breast and prostate, contribute to that. They disrupt our female reproductive system, and they are now saying that they are causative in leading to premature and early menopause. They can create oxidative stress, and by oxidative stress, that's then leading to damaging our cells. This is where we need a much greater abundance of antioxidants to mop up free radicals that are created in oxidative stress. And if we have too much oxidative stress, not enough antioxidants, then it damages the cells and tissues, and then can lead to other diseases that are found in the body. They may reduce the ability of weaker estrogen to naturally lock onto our cells. So it may create an additional burden of menopausal symptoms that we just don't need at this time. And previous studies have shown increased exposure to phthalates from personal care products significantly increases the risk of hot flashes and waking up at night, particularly in women. You'd expect that to be in women. So what can we do? We need to decide how we can reduce our exposure. You cannot completely get rid of your exposure unless you're going to, well, I was going to say lock yourself away somewhere and live in the forest. But, you know, if these things are in the air, we've got planes flying overhead, we may be getting them from that. You know, how do you completely do away with them? So this is some of the things that you could start to do in your day-to-day life. So going through some of these common things, BPA is found in plastic products. It's why we need to move away from plastic bottles. We know from an environmental point of view, we're being told to do that, and we understand why. But think about it primarily from your own health point of view. BPA is found in plastic food storage containers, in our water bottles, in cling film. It's also found in tin cans as well. So it can leach into food and drink, especially when the plastic is warm. You never want to drink from water in a warm plastic bottle. Phthalates are a nasty group of chemicals found commonly in toiletries and cosmetics, household cleaning products, and we know that they can find their way into the fatty tissues like in breast. So they are thought to contribute to things like breast cancer. They can also be found in some food packaging and in children's toys. There's another group of PFAs commonly found in non-stick pans and textile coatings. And then, of course, we've got things like pesticides, which we're going to find in our fruit and vegetables. And there's an increasing use of pesticides. Friends of the Earth found in 2019, there'd been a 24% increase in pesticide use since the year 2000. So that can only grow as more and more chemicals are introduced to preserve the life of our food, for example, to make it look nicer when it's in our supermarkets. And then we have these PCBs that come from manufacturing processes that can leach into water supplies. the manufacturing companies and factories shouldn't be allowed to put them into our water supplies, but unfortunately that does still happen. So in terms of minimizing your exposure, when you understand where some of these things come from, avoid plastic bottles at all times, and never leave a plastic bottle of water exposed to heat, because the BPA can leach into the water when it's heated. Carry water, of course, in a stainless steel bottle. I wouldn't even use those plastic bottles that you can then reuse unless they say they are BPA free. Use stainless steel, and some of these stainless steel bottles will help to keep the water chilled as well, which is useful. Be very careful keeping things in plastic storage containers, and don't reheat them, even if they say they're microwave friendly. You do not want to be reheating food in some of these plastic things. Don't wrap cheese in plastic food wrap, because of the fat in the cheese, and the plastic is not good. Be careful with tin cans. They can be lined in BPAs, especially for things like acidic foods like tomatoes. So you may find some tin cans saying they're BPA free, which would be the better things to choose. Natural toiletries. I've been using Neal's Yard Remedies, natural organic products since the year 2010, and I'm a consultant for Neal's Yard Remedies. I don't actively go out and promote that, but I can provide products and buy these on behalf of clients. And of course, these products are naturally phthalate free, as well as getting rid of as many unnatural, non-organic ingredients. And we know these chemicals can be absorbed directly through the skin, which is why I choose to use as much as possible organic skincare, like shower gels and hand washes and moisturizer and face washes, which I've been doing now for 13 years. When you think about your cookware, it is far better to buy stainless steel pans rather than these non-stick Tefal coated ones with a nasty chemical Tefal coating. And if you are thinking about replacing your pans, look at the ones that are really scratched, because they're going to have the greater exposure to the chemicals. When it comes to your food and you want to start to think about how you can reduce your chemical exposure with pesticides, and thinking about choosing organic, the most efficient, lower cost route to do that is to look at the Environmental Working Group website, the EWG.org, or search for Clean 15 and Dirty Dozen, because that way you can look at the dirtiest dozen of fruit and vegetables that have the highest level residue of chemicals that are left on them, whereas the Clean 15 have very, very few. So if you want to invest your money wisely with organic, then choose those. Try and buy organic meat and dairy. Avoid farm salmon. I choose wild Alaskan salmon because farm salmon is higher in these PCBs. And be careful eating these very large fish like tuna or swordfish, because very, very large fish have a much higher levels of toxicity from heavy metals like mercury. So be very careful with that. Filter your tap water. Buy the best available filter that you can to get rid of as many of those chemicals that are left in your water supply as possible. With candles, use natural wax candles. Don't buy the cheaper ones, even though they may have a fancy name and still be quite expensive. You do not want a petroleum candle that gives off that black soot. You want natural, like beeswax candles with natural essential oils, and avoid chemical air fresheners, just use natural sprays. That's why I like Neal's Yard Remedies again with their candles and their reed diffusers. They're beautiful. Choose natural cleaning household products and laundry products as much as you can, things like Method. And it's going through this list as much as you can and started to find ways, ticking things off the list, just gradually reducing your exposure. Of course, doing things like in-depth detoxification and helping the liver is a very good thing to do, which I like to do in the spring. maybe you could do it at this time of year as well, September, October, autumn time, as we're going through the seasons. Springtime is my favorite time to doing a big detox of the body. But you will be naturally detoxing when you start to reduce your exposure to these different chemicals in your day-to-day life. I hope you've enjoyed this. If you're watching this live, do come and join Karen Thrush and I, which is a week on Friday now, 27th of October, at Ufcott Farm, just outside Swindon, where we'll be running a menopause self-help workshop. So information like this will be absolutely provided. You'll have your own information sheets to take away. Karen Thrush, as a kinesiologist, is going to be giving you some wonderful self-help approaches as to how you can use kinesiology points to help you manage symptoms or avoid symptoms that may be occurring. And I'll also be sharing so much more than just this at this workshop day on Friday the 27th. So I will add the link below if you're watching this live. Of course, if you're watching this in my Facebook group or watching this as a podcast, you may be in time to sign up for that, or you may have missed it. But I hope you still find this of use to you, and have a wonderful week. I'll be back next Tuesday night with another menopause related talk, as it is Menopause Awareness Month. Thank you so much for listening or watching, and have a lovely week, everybody.